The wagon wheels groaned against the rutted dirt road, each rotation carrying Clara Mae Sullivan further from the only life she'd ever known. She pressed her face against the rough wooden slats, watching the Sisters of Mercy orphanage disappear into the dust cloud kicked up by the horses. 20 years of prayers, thin gruel, and mended stockings, gone like smoke in the desert wind. "Sit proper, girl," barked Mrs. Henrietta Blackwood, the woman who'd paid $30 silver for Clara's papers. "You ain't no charity case no more. You're merchandise now, and damaged goods don't fetch good prices." Clara straightened her spine against the hard bench, though her hands trembled in her lap. The other girls in the wagon, 3 of them, all younger, kept their eyes down. They'd learned quickly that Mrs. Blackwood's riding crop wasn't just for horses. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly as they traveled deeper into the borderlands. Red dust coated everything, their clothes, their skin, even their teeth when they dared open their mouths to breathe. Clara had never seen such desolation. Mile after mile of scrub brush, twisted mesquite trees, and rocks that seemed to shimmer with heat. Vultures circled overhead, patient as death itself. On the second day, they passed a burned-out homestead, its charred timbers reaching toward the sky like blackened fingers. A child's doll lay in the dirt, its porcelain face cracked by sun and weather. Clara wondered if Indians had done it, or bandits, or if the family had simply given up and torched their own dreams. That's what happens to folks who think they're too good for their station. "Mrs. Blackwood said, following Clara's gaze, "Remember that when you get where you're going." Where she was going. Clara knew only that she'd been purchased as a household companion for some rancher near the New Mexico border. The other girls whispered at night about what that meant, but Clara had seen enough of the world through the orphanage windows to understand. She was to warm a man's bed, cook his meals, and pretend she didn't mind when his hands got rough. They stopped at a trading post on the 4th day to water the horses. The place reeked of whiskey, tobacco, and unwashed men. Clara watched a card game through the dirty window while Mrs. Blackwood negotiated with the proprietor for supplies. One of the players, a Mexican with silver conchos on his vest, caught her looking and winked. She turned away quickly, but not before she saw him palm an ace from his sleeve. "You best learn to keep them eyes down," the youngest girl, Sarah, whispered. "Mrs. Blackwood don't like us looking at men, says it gives 'em ideas." But Clara had always been a watcher. It was how she'd survived the orphanage, noticing which sisters had gentle hands, which donors might slip her an extra penny, which corners were safe to cry in. She wouldn't stop now, not when watching might be the only thing between her and whatever waited at journey's end. The landscape grew wilder as they pushed north. Massive red rock formations rose from the earth like ancient titans. Rattlesnakes sunned themselves on flat stones, their warnings sharp in the still air. Once, a mountain lion watched them from a ridge, its tawny coat blending with the rocks until only its eyes betrayed its presence. On the 6th night, camped by a trickling creek, Mrs. Blackwood finally told Clara her destination. "Elijah Monroe," she said, sucking meat from a rabbit bone. "Lives up in the foothills, about 15 miles from the nearest town. Used to be quite the gun hand, or so they say. Got himself shot up bad a few years back, legs near useless now." "Why does he need—" Clara began, but Mrs. Blackwood cut her off with a harsh laugh. "Why does any man need a woman? He's got money enough to pay for one, and I've got girls to sell. Simple as that." She leaned closer, her breath sour with chicory coffee. "But here's the thing. Girl, Monroe's particular. Sent back the last 2 I brought him. Said they didn't suit. You better suit, or you'll be working the saloons in El Paso before month's end." Clara nodded, though her stomach churned. She'd heard about the saloons. The cribs out back where women serviced 20 men a night until disease or violence ended their misery. The final day's journey took them high into the mountains. The road narrowed to little more than a deer track, winding between pine trees and boulder fields. The air grew thin and cold. Clara pulled her thin shawl tighter, wishing for the wool coat the sisters had sold last winter to buy hymn books. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they crested a rise, and Clara saw it. A rough log cabin with a stone chimney, a barn that listed slightly to the left, and a corral where 2 horses stood with their heads down. It looked abandoned, forgotten, like a place where hope had died and been buried unmarked. "This is it, Mrs." Blackwood announced unnecessarily. Thunder rumbled overhead as they pulled into the yard. The first fat raindrops began to fall, cold as accusations. Clara helped unload her single carpet bag, everything she owned in the world, while Mrs. Blackwood marched to the front door and pounded with her fist. "Monroe, it's Henrietta Blackwood! I've brought your girl!" For a long moment, nothing. Then the door opened, and Clara got her first look at Elijah Monroe. He was tall, though he leaned heavily on a carved walking stick. Dark hair fell past his collar, streaked with premature gray. A thick beard covered the lower half of his face, but couldn't hide the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. His clothes were clean but worn. A flannel shirt, canvas trousers, boots that had seen better decades. But it was his eyes that made Clara's breath catch, gray as winter sky, holding a weariness that went bone deep. He looked at Clara for a long moment, then turned to Mrs. Blackwood. "She'll do." Money changed hands. Clara tried not to think about how much her life was worth in dollars and cents. "Mrs." Blackwood climbed back onto the wagon without a backward glance. The other girls stared at Clara through the rain, their faces pale ovals of fear and sympathy. Then they were gone, and Clara stood in the muddy yard with her carpet bag, rain soaking through her dress, facing a man who'd bought her like livestock. Monroe turned and limped back inside, leaving the door open. An invitation, or a command. Clara picked up her bag and followed. The cabin was sparse but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, cold now. A table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the window, shelves lined with books, more books than Clara had ever seen outside the orphanage library. A ladder led to what must be a loft. 2 doors opened off the main room, probably bedrooms. Monroe stood by the fireplace, his back to her. "There's a room there," he said, nodding toward one of the doors. "It's yours. I'll not have you in my bed." Clara blinked, certain she'd misheard. "Sir?" He turned then, and she saw something flash in those gray eyes. Anger? Pain. "I said, you'll have your own room. I need someone to cook, clean, tend the horses when my leg's bad. That's all." But Mrs. Blackwood said, "I don't care what that harpy said." His voice was rough as sandpaper. "I didn't ask for obedience. Didn't ask for a woman to warm my bed. I asked for—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "What did you ask for?" Clara heard herself say. Monroe stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned away, limping toward the other bedroom. "Get yourself dry. There's kindling by the hearth if you want a fire. I'll not have you catching pneumonia on your first night." The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Clara alone in the main room. She stood there, dripping on the plank floor, trying to understand what had just happened. She'd prepared herself for male hands, for whiskey breath, for pain endured in silence. She hadn't prepared for this strange mercy, if that's what it was. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the cabin in stark relief. In that brief moment, Clara saw everything clearly, the loneliness that seeped from the walls, the careful order that spoke of a man trying to hold himself together, the dust on the rocking chair that suggested no one had sat there in a very long time. She picked up her carpet bag and went to the room he'd indicated. It was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk for clothes. A faded quilt covered the bed, its pattern still visible. Wedding rings, sewn by some long-ago woman's patient hands. Clara sat on the bed and finally allowed herself to cry, not from fear or sorrow, but from sheer confusion. She'd thought she knew what her life would be. Now, sitting in this strange room while rain hammered the roof, she realized she knew nothing at all. In the other room, she heard Monroe moving about, the uneven rhythm of his steps, whatever he needed, whatever he'd paid for. It wasn't what she'd expected, and that uncertainty, that not knowing, it frightened her more than all of Mrs. Blackwood's threats combined. The rooster's crow came before dawn, sharp as a blade through the thin mountain air. Clara woke disoriented, her body aching from the narrow bed. For a moment, she thought she was back at the orphanage, but the absence of snoring girls and morning bells brought reality crashing back. She dressed quickly in her second dress, only slightly less worn than the first, and ventured into the main room. Monroe was already up, stoking the fire with awkward movements that favored his bad leg. He didn't acknowledge her presence, just continued feeding kindling to the growing flames. "I can do that," Clara offered. He paused, then stepped back without a word. She knelt by the hearth, taking over the task while he lowered himself into a chair at the table. She could feel his eyes on her as she worked, assessing, measuring. "Coffee's in the tin on the shelf," he said finally. "Bacon's in the cold box on the porch. Hens out back should have eggs." It was more words than he'd spoken since her arrival. Clara nodded and set about making breakfast, grateful for the familiar routine. The orphanage had taught her to cook for dozens on meager supplies. Feeding one taciturn rancher seemed simple by comparison. The hens were where he'd said, pecking in the dirt behind a wire fence that had seen better days. Clara gathered 6 brown eggs, noting the coop needed cleaning and one hen had a hurt foot. The cold box held bacon, a loaf of sourdough, and some questionable vegetables. She'd seen worse. Monroe ate in silence, but she noticed he cleaned his plate. When he finished, he pushed back from the table and reached for his walking stick. "I'll be in the barn," he said. "Got a horse with a split hoof, needs tending." "Should you—" Clara began, then bit her tongue. It wasn't her place to question what he should or shouldn't do with his injury. Something flickered across his face. Surprise. Maybe. "Should I what?" "Nothing, sir." "Elijah," he said. "Or Eli. None of this sir business." He paused at the door. "And yes, I should probably rest the leg. But the horses don't care about my comfort. And neither does the ranch." After he left, Clara explored her new domain. The cabin was well built but showing its age. Gaps between the logs needed chinking before winter. The iron stove had a temperamental damper. Mouse droppings in the corners suggested unwanted tenants. But it was solid, dry, and a far cry from the dormitory at Sisters of Mercy. She spent the morning cleaning, losing herself in the simple pleasure of setting things right. By noon, she'd scrubbed the floors, beaten the dust from the rag rug, and started a pot of beans soaking for supper. Through the window, she watched Monroe, Eli, working with a bay mare, his movements careful but competent despite his disability. The first week passed in careful routine. Clara rose early, cooked, cleaned, tended the chickens. Eli spent his days with the horses or mending fences, returning exhausted and gray-faced with pain he refused to acknowledge. They ate together but rarely spoke beyond the necessities of running a household. She learned his preferences without being told. Coffee black as sin and twice as strong. Eggs over easy. Beans with plenty of salt pork. He liked his shirts pressed just so, though he never asked for it. He read by lamplight after supper. Everything from penny dreadfuls to thick volumes of Shakespeare. The early snow came on her 10th day, catching them both by surprise. Clara woke to a world transformed, white and silent as death. She found Eli in the barn, trying to pitch hay one-handed while balancing on his good leg. "Let me," she said, reaching for the pitchfork. "You ever pitched hay before?" "No, but I can learn." He studied her for a moment, then handed over the fork. "Keep your back straight. Use your legs, not your arms. And watch that mare. She bites when she's hungry." It was harder than it looked. Within minutes, her shoulders screamed and sweat ran down her back despite the cold. But she kept at it, forking hay into the stalls while Eli filled water buckets. They worked in companionable silence, and Clara felt something ease in her chest, a knot she hadn't known was there. That night, the temperature plummeted. Clara piled every blanket she could find on her bed but still shivered. Around midnight, she gave up and crept to the main room to build up the fire. Eli was already there, sitting in the rocking chair with a blanket around his shoulders. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. "Too cold. First winter up here? First winter anywhere but the orphanage?" He nodded slowly. "It gets easier. Or maybe you just get tougher. Hard to say which." She settled on the floor near the fire, tucking her nightgown around her feet. "How long have you lived here? 6 years? Bought the place after?" He stopped, jaw tightening. Clara waited, but he didn't continue. She'd learned his silences were like walls. Pushing against them only made them stronger. "You should learn to shoot," he said suddenly. "What?" "A woman alone out here needs to know how to protect herself. Wolves come down from the high country when they're hungry. Sometimes men do too." "I'm not alone," Clara pointed out. His laugh was bitter. "A crippled gunfighter's not much protection. You're not?" "Yes, I am." His voice was flat, matter of fact. "Bullet shattered my knee, tore up the muscle. On good days, I can almost walk normal. On bad days, I can barely stand. Man who can't trust his own body can't protect anyone." Clara pulled her knees to her chest, studying him in the firelight. The scar on his face looked deeper in the dancing shadows, and she wondered about the violence that had marked him inside and out. "I'd like to learn," she said quietly. "To shoot, I mean," he nodded. "Tomorrow, if the snow stops." But the snow didn't stop. For 3 days, it fell steady and relentless, sealing them inside while the wind howled like grieving women. Eli grew restless as a caged wolf, pacing the cabin with his uneven gait until Clara thought he'd wear grooves in the floor. On the 3rd night, his leg gave out completely. She heard the crash from her room and found him on the floor by the table, face twisted in pain. "Don't," he growled when she moved to help. She ignored him, sliding her arm under his shoulders. "Stop being stubborn. I said don't, and I'm not listening." She helped him to his feet, taking as much of his weight as her small frame could manage. Which is worse, accepting help or lying on the floor all night? He leaned on her heavily as they made their way to his room. She'd never been inside before. It was sparse as a monk's cell, a bed, a trunk, a washstand. But the walls were covered with pencil drawings. Horses, mostly. But also landscapes, faces, hands. The artist had real talent. "Did you do these?" "Long time ago." He sank onto the bed, sweat beading his forehead. "Different life." Clara lit the lamp and saw the old wound clearly for the first time. His trouser leg had ridden up, revealing twisted scar tissue and a knee that bent at an unnatural angle. "There's a bottle in the trunk," he said through gritted teeth. "Laudanum." She found it, along with clean bandages and a jar of evil-smelling salve. "How often does it get this bad?" "Often enough." He took a careful sip of the laudanum. "Usually I can manage. When's the last time you saw a doctor?" "Year ago, maybe 2. His eyes were already glazing from the medicine. "Nothing they can do anyway?" Clara spent that night in the chair beside his bed. He thrashed with fever dreams, muttering names she didn't recognize. Samuel, James, Maria. Once he called out a warning about raiders from the south. She kept cold compresses on his forehead and forced water between his lips when she could. By morning, the fever had broken. Eli woke to find Clara asleep in the chair, her head pillowed on the edge of his bed. Something shifted in his face as he watched her, a softening around his eyes, a loosening of the perpetual tension in his jaw. When she stirred, he was reading one of his books, pretending he hadn't been staring. "You stayed," he said without looking up. "Someone had to." "No, no one had to." She stood, stretching muscles cramped from sleeping upright. "I'll make breakfast." "Clara." She stopped at the door. "Thank you." It was the first time he'd used her name. After that night, something changed between them. The careful distance remained, but it was softer now, like river stones worn smooth. Eli began talking more at meals, about the horses, the weather, safe topics that occasionally revealed glimpses of the man beneath the scars. He kept his promise about teaching her to shoot. On a crisp morning with new snow crunching underfoot, he showed her how to hold his old Navy Colt, how to sight down the barrel, how to squeeze rather than pull the trigger. Her first shots went wild, striking trees, rocks, everything but the tin cans he'd set up. But Eli was patient, adjusting her stance, steadying her hands with his own. "Don't fight the gun," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "It's a tool, not an enemy." By the end of the week, she could hit 3 cans out of 5. Eli nodded approval, and Clara felt absurdly proud, as if she'd passed some crucial test. Winter deepened its grip. They fell into rhythms of survival, checking the animals, hauling water before it froze, keeping the fire burning through bitter nights. Clara learned to read Eli's pain by the set of his shoulders, the tightness around his mouth, on bad days. She took over his chores without comment. On good days, they worked side by side, 2 people learning to occupy the same space without collision. And somewhere in those frozen weeks, as they fought together against winter's siege, Clara stopped feeling like property and started feeling like something else entirely. She couldn't name it yet, this new thing growing between them like spring seeds beneath snow. But it was there, waiting for warmer days to bloom. The thaw came slowly, reluctant as a confession. Ice dripped from the eaves in a steady rhythm, while Clara watched Eli work with a young colt in the corral. His movements had grown more confident over the winter months, as if her presence had somehow steadied him. She'd catch him smiling sometimes, just a slight upturn of his lips when the horses responded to his touch. "You're staring," he said without turning around. Heat rushed to her cheeks. "Just wondering if you need help." "Come here, then." She climbed through the fence rails, approaching the colt carefully. It was a beautiful animal, all legs and nervous energy, coat black as midnight except for a white star between its eyes. "Hand out, palm flat," Eli instructed. "Let him come to you." The colt sniffed her hand, velvet nose tickling her skin. When it didn't bolt, Eli nodded approval. "You've got away with them," he said. "Natural, gentle touch. That's rare." Their eyes met across the colt's back, and something electric passed between them. Clara looked away first, focusing on the horse's mane. "My brother was good with horses," Eli said suddenly. "Samuel could calm the wildest bronc just by talking to it. It was the first time he'd volunteered information about his past." Clara held her breath, afraid any response might close the door he'd cracked open. "He died at Chickamauga," Eli continued, his voice carefully neutral. 17 years old. I was supposed to protect him." "You were in the war?" 3 years, Texas cavalry." He ran his hand along the colt's neck. "Came home to find everything gone. Family dead from fever, ranch sold for taxes. So I turned to the only skill the war had taught me. Gunfighting." He nodded. "Made a name for myself. Made money too. Also made enemies." His hand moved unconsciously to his bad leg. "One of them finally collected what I owed." Clara reached across the space between them, her fingers barely grazing his sleeve. "I'm sorry." He looked at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. "Don't be. Man makes his choices, lives with the consequences." That night after supper, instead of retreating to his books, Eli pulled out a worn deck of cards. "You play? The sisters would have switched us bloody for card playing. Then it's time you learned." He taught her poker first, using dried beans for stakes. Clara was a quick study, learning to read his tells, the way his thumb rubbed his jaw when he had a good hand, how his eyes narrowed slightly when he was bluffing. "You're cheating," she accused after losing her 5th hand. "Proving a point. Never play cards with someone you don't trust." He gathered the cards, shuffling with practiced ease despite his calloused hands. "Out here, trust is worth more than gold. Do you trust me?" The question hung between them like smoke. Eli set down the cards, studying her with those storm-gray eyes. "I'm starting to—" Spring arrived in earnest, painting the hills with wildflowers. Clara had never seen such color: purple lupines, yellow columbines, Indian paintbrush red as blood. She picked bouquets for the table, bringing the outside world into their small domain. One evening, as she arranged flowers in a cracked mason jar, Eli came up behind her. "That's nice," he said. "Maria used to—" He stopped abruptly. "Who was Maria?" His jaw tightened. "No one. Forget I said anything." But Clara had learned patience over the winter months. She waited. And 3 days later, while mending harnesses in the barn, he spoke again. "Maria was my fiancée before the war." His hands never paused in their work. "Her father owned the neighboring ranch. We were going to combine the properties, raise horses and children." Clara kept her eyes on her own mending. "What happened?" "I happened. Came back from the war different. Angry. Violent." He set down the leather, flexing his scarred hands. She tried to understand, but how could she? How could anyone who hadn't been there? So she left? I left, told her she deserved better than a man who woke up screaming, who reached for his gun at every sudden sound. His laugh was bitter. Noble of me, wasn't it? Deciding what she deserved without asking what she wanted. Clara set aside her work and moved closer. Maybe she would have chosen to stay. Maybe, but I'd already chosen for her. He looked at her then. Really looked at her. I'm good at that, choosing for others. Like I chose for you, deciding what you would and wouldn't be in this house. I don't understand. Don't you? He stood abruptly, pacing to the barn door. I told myself I was being honorable, keeping you at arm's length, but maybe I was just being a coward again? Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Eli, you should know something. He turned back to her, his face set in hard lines. I didn't send those other girls back because they didn't suit. I sent them back because they reminded me I was still a man, with a man's wants. It seemed safer to be alone. And now? Now I watch you at your work and forget to breathe. Now I lie awake listening to you move about your room and wish. He stopped, shaking his head. It doesn't matter what I wish. Clara crossed the space between them, stopping just out of reach. It matters to me. You don't know what you're saying. I'm broken. Clara, in more ways than just my leg, we're all broken, she said quietly. That's how the light gets in. He stared at her, something raw and desperate in his eyes. Then he turned and limped from the barn, leaving her standing in the golden afternoon light. That night, Clara couldn't settle. She tried reading one of Eli's books, but the words swam before her eyes. Finally, she gave up and went to build up the fire. He was there, as she'd somehow known he would be. Sitting in the rocking chair, staring at the flames. Can't sleep? She asked. Story of my life. He didn't look at her. I'm sorry, for earlier, I shouldn't have... Stop! She moved closer, standing beside his chair. Stop apologizing for being human. Is that what I am? His voice was barely a whisper. Instead of answering, Clara did something that surprised them both. She reached out and traced the scar on his face. Following its path from temple to jaw, he went absolutely still under her touch. Who did this? Man named Jake Morrison. Thought I'd cheated him at cards. His eyes closed. He was right. Her fingers moved to his hair, smoothing the gray-streaked strands back from his forehead. And the leg? His brother, better shot than Jake. She knelt beside the chair, her hand still in his hair. They're just marks, Eli. They're not who you are. He caught her wrist, his grip gentle but firm. Clara, you don't owe me anything. Whatever that woman told you, whatever you think you have to do, I'm not here because I have to be. She turned her hand in his grip, lacing their fingers together. Not anymore. He searched her face, looking for something, pity, obligation, fear. Whatever he found made his breath catch. I haven't been with a woman since Maria, he said roughly. Haven't wanted to be, until you... Clara rose to her knees, bringing their faces level. I've never been with anyone, never wanted to be, until you. The fire crackled, sending shadows dancing across the walls. Outside, a wolf howled, lonely and distant. But inside the cabin, the world had shrunk to just the two of them, to the space between their bodies and the heat in their joined hands. Clara, Eli whispered. and her name on his lips was prayer and plea combined. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their first kiss was tentative, careful, as if they were both made of glass. But then Eli's free hand came up to cup her face, and careful became something else entirely, when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. Clara saw wonder in his eyes. "I don't want obedience," he said, echoing his words from that first night. "I want you. Just you, as you are. Then have me," she whispered. He stood, pulling her up with him. For a moment they just stood there, holding each other in the firelight. Then Eli stepped back, his hand sliding down to take hers. "Not like this," he said. "Not in haste or shadow. You deserve better." Clara wanted to protest that she didn't care about deserving, but something in his face stopped her. This mattered to him, doing right by her, treating her as more than just a body to warm his bed. "Then how?" she asked. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her palm with infinite tenderness. "Come to me when you're certain, when you know it's what you want, not what you think I need." She nodded, understanding what he was offering. Choice, the one thing she'd never had before. They stood there for another moment, hands clasped, bodies swaying toward each other like flowers toward sun. Then Clara stepped back. "Good night, Eli. Good night, Clara." She walked to her room on unsteady legs, feeling his eyes on her until the door closed between them. Her body hummed with new sensations, her lips still tingling from his kiss. Through the thin wall, she heard him moving about, restless as a caged thing. She pressed her palm against the rough wood, imagining she could feel his heartbeat through the barrier. Soon, she promised herself, when the time was right, when certainty settled in her bones like morning light. Soon, she would go to him not as property or obligation, but as a woman choosing her man. And from the way he'd looked at her, the way he'd said her name like it was the only word that mattered, she knew he would be waiting. The days that followed their kiss were filled with a new kind of tension, sweet and sharp as honey from wild bees. Clara and Eli moved around each other with exquisite care, every accidental touch sending sparks through the air. They worked side by side, mending the fence line, their hands brushing as they passed tools back and forth. They sat closer at meals, knees almost touching beneath the table. But, true to his word, Eli didn't push. He waited with a patience that both frustrated and moved Clara. She caught him watching her sometimes. Heat in his gray eyes quickly banked when she met his gaze. 2 weeks passed in this suspended state. Then came the morning Clara woke to find Eli already gone. A note on the kitchen table. "Gone to town for supplies. Back by sunset." She spent the day in restless activity, scrubbing floors that were already clean, reorganizing shelves that didn't need it. As afternoon shadows lengthened with no sign of him, worry crept in. The road to town was rough, and his leg had been paining him lately. When darkness fell without his return, Clara saddled the gentle mare and rode out despite the moonless night. She found him 2 miles from home, sitting beside the wagon with his head in his hands. "Wheel came off," he said without looking up. "Couldn't lift it back on." She dismounted and knelt beside him, seeing the shame written in every line of his body. "Are you hurt?" "Just my pride." He laughed bitterly. "Was a time I could have fixed this with one hand. Now I can't even—" "Stop!" She gripped his shoulders, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You're the strongest man I know. Elijah Monroe. Not because of what your body can do, but because of who you are." Something broke in his face then. "Clara, She silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her certainty into the contact. When she pulled back, his eyes were wet. "Let's go home," she said simply. They left the wagon for morning, riding double on the mare with Clara's arms wrapped around Eli's waist. Neither spoke, but she felt the tension leaving his body mile by mile. Back at the cabin, she helped him inside and lit the lamps while he sank into his chair. She made coffee, strong and bitter the way he liked it, and pressed the cup into his hands. "Thank you," he said quietly. Clara pulled the other chair close, their knees touching. For what? For seeing me, not what I was, not what I should be, just me. She took the cup from his hands and set it aside, then shifted onto his lap, careful of his leg. His breath caught, hands coming up automatically to steady her. "Eli," she said, framing his face with her hands. "I'm certain now." He searched her eyes in the lamplight. "Clara, are you sure? Once we cross this line, we've already crossed it." She traced his scar with her thumb. "That night you kissed me, you became mine, and I became yours. The rest is just details." He made a sound somewhere between laugh and sob, burying his face against her neck. She held him, fingers threading through his hair, until he lifted his head. "My room or yours?" His voice was rough with emotion. "Yours," she said without hesitation. "I want to be surrounded by you." He stood carefully, Clara sliding off his lap to support him. Together they made their way to his room, where moonlight now spilled through the window, painting everything in silver. Clara lit the lamp with trembling fingers while Eli sat on the bed's edge. When she turned back, he was watching her with such naked longing it stole her breath. "Come here," he said softly. She went, standing between his knees. His hands came up to rest on her waist, thumbs stroking the fabric of her dress. "I need to tell you something," he said, "about that night, the shooting. You don't have to—" "Yes, I do." His grip tightened slightly. "I want you to know who you're choosing." Clara covered his hands with hers, waiting. "The Morrison brothers caught me in a saloon in El Paso. I was drunk, angry, looking for a fight, when Jake accused me of cheating. I didn't deny it. I wanted violence, wanted to hurt someone the way I was hurting." He looked up at her. "They gave me what I was looking for. Jake went for his gun first, but I was faster. Killed him before he cleared leather. His brother Ben shot me as I turned. Fair fight by any measure, but I could have walked away, could have refused the game, left the saloon, chosen different. Instead, I orphaned Ben Morrison and crippled myself, all because I couldn't face my own pain." Clara studied his face, seeing the weight of old guilt. "And now I know there are better ways to feel alive than courting death." His hands moved to her hips, drawing her closer. "Now I have reasons to be careful with this life." She leaned down and kissed him, slow and deep. His arms came around her, pulling her onto his lap again. This time there was no hesitation, no holding back. His hands tangled in her hair, pins scattering across the floor. She tugged at his shirt, kneading skin against skin. "Wait," he gasped, pulling back. "Your hair. Let me see it down." She stood and finished unpinning the long auburn mass, letting it fall past her waist. Eli's breath caught. "Beautiful," he murmured, like fire in the lamplight. Heat bloomed in her cheeks, but she didn't look away. Slowly, hands only slightly unsteady, she began unbuttoning her dress. Eli watched every movement, his gaze reverent as each layer fell away. When she stood before him in just her chemise, he reached out and traced the delicate embroidery at the neckline, work she'd done by candlelight at the orphanage. Never imagining this moment. "You're shaking," he said. "So are you." He huffed a laugh. "Fair point." He caught her hand, pressing it flat against his chest where his heart hammered. "Feel that? That's what you do to me. Clara May. Every damn minute of every damn day." She helped him with his shirt, careful of his shoulders where old injuries had left their mark. His chest was a map of violence, scars from bullets, knives, fists. She traced each one, learning this new geography of pain and survival. "They're not pretty," he said roughly. "They're you," she countered. "That makes them beautiful to me." He pulled her back onto his lap, skin finally meeting skin. The first contact sent lightning through her veins. His hands roamed her back, her sides, learning her shape while she did the same. When he laid her back on the bed, she saw uncertainty flicker across his face. "My leg, I can't, not the way a whole man could." She pressed her fingers to his lips. "Then we'll find our own way. Together." What followed was careful and tender and awkward and perfect. Eli's hands shook as he touched her, reverent as a man handling sacred things. He talked her through each moment, voice low and rough, making sure she was comfortable, that she wanted this. "Yes," she gasped against his shoulder. "Yes, Eli, please." When they joined, it was with infinite care. Clara bit her lip at the first sharp discomfort, but Eli held still, pressing kisses to her face, her throat, until her body relaxed and discomfort became something else. They moved together slowly, learning this new dance. Eli's bad leg meant traditional positions were impossible, but they found ways that worked. Clara above him or beside him, taking control when his body faltered. "Look at me," he whispered when sensation threatened to overwhelm her. "Stay with me, Clara." She opened eyes she hadn't realized she'd closed, meeting his gaze. What she saw there, wonder, worship, raw need, pushed her over an edge she hadn't known existed. She cried out, clutching his shoulders, and felt him follow her over. Afterward, they lay tangled together, sweat cooling on their skin. Eli's hand stroked lazily down her spine while she traced patterns on his chest. Did I hurt you?" he asked. "Only for a moment. Then it was—" She searched for words. "Like flying, like coming home." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You honored me tonight. Gave me a gift I'll spend the rest of my days trying to deserve." "Eli, no, let me say this." He tilted her chin up. "I've done terrible things, Clara. Killed men for money, destroyed lives for pride. I don't deserve gentleness, don't deserve love, but you gave me both anyway." "Because you're not that man anymore," she said firmly. "That man wouldn't have taken me in without demands, wouldn't have waited for me to choose, wouldn't have cared if he hurt me." "Maybe." He was quiet for a moment. "Or maybe you're making me better than I was." They made love again as dawn approached, slower this time, savoring each touch. Clara discovered the spot behind his ear that made him groan, the way his hands clutched at her hips when she moved just so. He found she was ticklish along her ribs, that kissing her neck made her gasp his name like a prayer. When sunlight finally spilled through the window, they lay exhausted and sated. Clara's head rested on Eli's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. "What happens now?" she asked. His arm tightened around her. "Now you're mine, and I'm yours, if you'll have me." "I already said yes." "I mean proper, legal, a ring and a preacher and your name next to mine in the county record." Clara propped herself up on an elbow, studying his face. "You want to marry me?" "Wanted to since the night I taught you cards and you called me a cheater with that little smile." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "But I'll understand if you say no. You're young, beautiful. You could have any man." She silenced him with a kiss. "I don't want any man. I want the one who saw me as more than merchandise, the one who gave me choices when the world gave me none. Is that a yes?" "That's a yes. Elijah Monroe." He rolled them carefully, mindful of his leg, until she was beneath him. "Say it again." "Yes." She laughed, pulling him down. "Yes, yes, yes." Outside, the morning birds began their chorus. The horses whickered for their breakfast. The world called with all its mundane demands. But inside their small room, Clara and Eli held each other and let the world wait. They'd found something worth more than gold or glory. Two broken people making each other whole. And that, Clara thought as sleep finally claimed them, was its own kind of miracle. The letter was waiting on the kitchen table when Clara returned from gathering eggs. Her name, her old name, the one from the orphanage records, stared up at her in unfamiliar handwriting. Ice formed in her stomach as she picked it up with trembling fingers. Inside, the words were brief but devastating. "Know where you are, know what you've done, coming to collect what's owed. J.W." Clara sank into a chair, the eggs forgotten. She knew those initials. Jake Whelan had run the Golden Dollar Saloon in Amarillo, the place where she'd worked for exactly 3 weeks before fleeing in terror. 3 weeks of serving drinks and dodging grabbing hands, of sleeping with a chair wedged against her door, of promises that her real work would start soon. She'd taken nothing when she ran. Nothing except the $100 from Jake's office safe. Money she'd seen him count out after selling another girl to a mining camp brothel. Blood money, she'd told herself. Better in her hands than his. "Clara?" Eli's voice from the doorway made her jump. "What's wrong?" She tried to hide the letter, but he was already crossing the room, concern etched on his face. He took the paper from her nerveless fingers, read it quickly, then read it again. "Who's JW?" The whole story spilled out. Her desperate flight from the orphanage when Sister Catherine announced she'd been placed in service. The weeks of hunger on the road. The false salvation of the golden dollar. The midnight escape with stolen money that had kept her alive until Mrs. Blackwood found her. Eli listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, Clara waited for the anger, the disgust, the withdrawal of his love. Instead, he knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. "You survived," he said simply. "That's all that matters." "But I stole—" "From a man who traffics in human misery? That's not theft. That's justice." His grip tightened. "How did he find you?" "I don't know. Maybe Mrs. Blackwood." She stopped, remembering the woman's greed. She'd sell information as easily as girls. Eli stood, pacing to the window. "When will they come?" "I don't know. Soon, probably. Jake doesn't like waiting for what he thinks is his." She rose on unsteady legs. "I should leave. Tonight. If I'm gone when they arrive." "No." The word cracked like a whip. Eli turned from the window, and she saw the gunfighter in his eyes, cold, calculating, dangerous. "You're not running again," he said. "This is your home. Our home. We defend what's ours." "Eli, you don't understand. Jake has men, guns. So did the Morrison brothers." He crossed to her, cupping her face. "I failed to protect Samuel. Failed to protect myself. I won't fail you. This isn't your fight. You're my woman. That makes every fight of yours mine." He kissed her forehead. "We have time to prepare. I know men like this, Whelan. They'll want to make a show of it, prove their power. That gives us advantages." But Clara couldn't share his confidence. That night, she lay awake beside him, listening to his breathing and planning her escape. Better to lose him by her own choice than see him bleed out defending her honor. She'd survived alone before. She could do it again. She waited until the deepest part of the night, then slipped from their bed. She dressed silently, packed her few belongings, and wrote a note with shaking hands. "My love, I cannot bear to be the cause of more scars on your body or soul. You gave me the first real choice I ever had. Now I choose to protect you, even if it means leaving you. Please understand. Find someone worthy of the life you're building. I will carry you in my heart always." She left it on her pillow and crept from the room. The main door opened silently. She'd oiled the hinges herself just last week. The night was cold, stars brilliant in the mountain air. She'd saddle the gentle mare, ride for the border. Going somewhere? Clara spun to find Eli sitting on the porch steps, fully dressed, his navy coat across his lap. "How did you—" "Know you'd run? Because I know you, Clara May, know how that good heart of yours works." He stood carefully, favoring his bad leg. "Also, you talk in your sleep." Tears burned her eyes. "Please, Eli, just let me go." "No." He moved closer, backing her against the porch rail. "You stood by me through fever and pain. You saw my weakness and called it strength. You think I'd do less for you? This is different. Jake won't stop until he's dead, or we are. I understand the mathematics." His hand came up to rest against her cheek. "But you're forgetting something." "What?" "I was very good at killing before my conscience caught up. Still am, bad leg and all." His thumb stroked her cheekbone. "Besides, you're not the only one with a past. Man makes enemies in my former line of work. Been waiting 6 years for someone to come calling. At least now I have something worth fighting for." Clara broke then, sobbing against his chest while he held her. They stood there until the sky began to lighten, then went inside to plan. Eli spent the next days preparing with military precision. He cleaned and oiled every weapon, positioned rifles at strategic windows, taught Clara signals and fallback positions. She watched him work, seeing the deadly competence that had made his reputation. "They'll likely come at dawn," he explained, sketching rough diagrams. "Sun at their backs, thinking we'll be sleep-soft. We'll be ready. You'll be in the loft with the Winchester. I'll take the main floor." "I don't want to kill anyone," Clara said quietly. "Then don't. Shoot to warn, to wound if necessary. Leave the killing to me." His voice was matter-of-fact. "That's my particular burden to carry." A week passed in tense preparation. Then another. Clara began to hope Jake had been bluffing, that the letter was meant only to frighten. But Eli remained vigilant, and his instincts proved true. They came on a Tuesday morning, just as he'd predicted. Clara was already in position when the first rider appeared on the ridge, Jake Whelan himself, flanked by 4 hard cases with guns showing. "Monroe," Jake's voice carried clearly in the still air. "Send out my property, and we ride away peaceful-like." Eli stepped onto the porch, rifle casual in his hands. "No property here. Whelan, just my wife and our home." Wife. They weren't married yet. But the word sent warmth through Clara even as fear chilled her bones. Jake laughed, ugly and sharp. "Wife? That little thief spread her legs and you think that makes her respectable?" The rifle in Eli's hands shifted slightly. "Choose your next words careful-like. They might be your last." "Big talk from a cripple. Heard about you. Monroe. Heard you were something once. Now you're just a broken-down killer hiding behind a woman's skirts." "Maybe so," Eli said calmly. "But this broken-down killer can still put a bullet through your left eye at this distance. Want to test it?" The tension stretched taut. Clara sighted down the Winchester, picking her target, the man furthest left, who kept fingering his pistol. Then Jake made his move, going for his gun with practiced speed, but Eli was faster, even damaged. His rifle cracked once, and Jake's hat flew off. A neat hole punched through the crown. "Next one goes lower," Eli announced as Jake's men froze. "You boys want to die for $100 and a runaway girl." One of the riders, older than the others, spoke up. "Jake, maybe we should—" "Shut up!" Jake's face was purple with rage. "She stole from me! Made me look weak!" "You are weak," Clara heard herself say. She stood up in the loft window. "Winchester steady. Weak men hurt women because they can't face other men. Weak men buy and sell people like cattle. You want your money? It's gone. Spent on food and shelter and staying free of men like you." Jake's hand twitched toward his gun again, and Clara fired. The bullet kicked up dust inches from his horse's hooves. The animal reared, nearly unseating him. "That's my wife," Eli said, pride clear in his voice. "Fair warning. Boys, I taught her to shoot, and she's got a steady hand. You can ride away now, or you can bleed in my yard. Choose quick." The older rider backed his horse. "This ain't worth dying for. Jake, get back here. Wallace!" But Wallace was already turning away, followed quickly by 2 others. Only one man remained, young and hungry-looking, hand hovering near his gun. "Don't," Eli warned. "You're what, 20? Got your whole life ahead. Don't throw it away for pride." The young man looked between Jake and Eli, then at Clara in the window. Something in her face must have decided him. He touched his hat brim and rode after the others. Jake sat alone, shaking with fury. "This isn't over." "Yes," Eli said quietly. "It is. You come near my wife again, I'll kill you. Send other men. I'll kill them too. Keep sending them until you run out of fools or money. But she's under my protection now, and I've got nothing left to lose but her." Jake wheeled his horse, but turned back for a parting shot. "You think you saved her. You just delayed the inevitable. Women like her always end up where they belong." Eli's rifle spoke again, and Jake's saddle horn exploded in a shower of leather and wood. The horse bolted, carrying its cursing rider over the ridge and gone. Clara flew down the ladder and out the door, throwing herself into Eli's arms. He caught her, spinning her around despite his bad leg, both of them laughing with relief and leftover fear. "You called me your wife," she said when he set her down. Seemed like the right time. He kissed her soundly. We should make it true, though, soon as possible. Yes, she agreed. But Eli, what if he comes back? Then I'll kill him. No bravado, just fact. But I don't think he will. Bullies like Jake need easy victories. We just proved we're anything but easy. They went inside, adrenaline slowly fading. Clara made coffee with shaking hands while Eli secured the weapons. When she turned from the stove, he was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. What? You stood up, he said, in that window, knowing you'd draw fire. Defended yourself with words and bullets both. I was terrified. But you did it anyway. That's courage. Clara May. He pulled her close. My warrior woman. She laughed against his chest, tension finally breaking. I don't feel like a warrior. I feel like I might be sick. That's normal. First time I faced down a man. I shook for hours after. He stroked her hair. Gets easier with practice, though I hope to God you never need practice. They held each other in the morning light. Two survivors who'd found something worth fighting for. Outside, dust still hung in the air from the rider's departure, but inside was peace, hard-won and precious. No more running, Clara said. No more running. Eli agreed. We make our stand here, together. And for the first time since finding that letter, Clara believed they could. The town of Cedar Ridge hadn't seen excitement like this in months. Clara stood beside Eli in front of Judge Harlan's office, wearing her best dress, the blue one she'd made from fabric Eli brought back from his last supply run. Her hands were steady, but her heart hammered as curious faces gathered on the boardwalk. You sure about this? Eli asked quietly, his hand finding hers. Never been more sure of anything. He squeezed her fingers. They'll talk. Some will be cruel. Let them. She lifted her chin. I've been called worse than what they'll say. Judge Harlan appeared in his doorway, spectacles perched on his nose. Mr. Monroe, Miss Sullivan, you wish to discuss a marriage license? Yes, sir, Eli said. We'd like to be married, today, if possible. The judge's eyebrows rose. Rather sudden, isn't it? And Miss Sullivan, I'll need to verify you're of age and unencumbered. Clara felt Eli tense beside her, but she spoke before he could. I'm 22 years old. Judge, born at Sisters of Mercy Orphanage in Amarillo, and yes, I'm unencumbered, unless you count my love for this man as an encumbrance. A whisper ran through the gathering crowd. Clara heard the word orphanage passed from lip to lip, saw the knowing looks, the curled lips. A woman in black bombazine sniffed loudly and turned away. I see. Judge Harlan studied them both. And you, Mr. Monroe, you're prepared to take this woman as your legal wife? I am. Even knowing there may be questions about her past? Eli's voice went cold as winter steel. Anyone who questions my wife's honor will answer to me. The judge nodded slowly. Very well, but I'm afraid we have a problem. Town council passed a new ordinance last month. Any woman seeking marriage must have 2 respectable citizens vouch for her character. Clara's heart sank. She knew no one in Cedar Ridge except the shopkeepers she'd bought from, and they'd barely acknowledged her existence. That's not... Eli began hotly, but Clara touched his arm. It's all right, she said, though it wasn't. We'll come back another time. Now hold on there. The voice came from the crowd. An older woman pushed forward, her gray hair neat under a practical bonnet. Clara recognized her. Mrs. Ellen Patterson, the minister's wife. I'll vouch for Miss Sullivan. Mrs. Patterson announced. I've seen how she cares for Mr. Monroe, how hard she works. That tells me all I need to know about her character. Shocked whispers erupted. The minister's wife, defending a fallen woman? Ellen, hissed a woman beside her. You don't know what she is. I know she's a child of God seeking to make an honest life. Mrs. Patterson replied firmly. That's enough for me, and I'll be the second. This voice belonged to Tom Martinez, the Mexican blacksmith. He stepped forward, ignoring the scandalized looks. Mr. Monroe helped my family when we first came here, when others wouldn't. His woman is good enough for me. Judge Harlan looked like he'd swallowed something sour, but the law was the law. Very well. Come inside. The ceremony was brief, witnessed by Mrs. Patterson and Tom Martinez. Clara barely heard the words, too aware of Eli's warm hand in hers, of the ring he'd somehow procured. Simple silver, but perfect. I now pronounce you man and wife, Judge Harlan intoned. Mr. Monroe, you may kiss your bride. Eli cupped her face gently, his kiss soft and sweet. When they parted, Clara saw tears in his eyes. They signed the register. Clara writing Clara May Monroe with a flourishing hand. It was official, legal. No one could separate them now. Outside, the crowd had grown. Some faces showed curiosity, others disapproval, a few outright hostility. Clara kept her head high as they walked toward their wagon. Eli Monroe! They turned to find Mayor Douglas approaching, his face red with indignation. Behind him trailed several members of the town council. What's this I hear about you marrying some saloon girl? Eli stepped slightly in front of Clara. I married my wife. That's all anyone needs to know. Now see here, the mayor blustered. This town has standards. We can't have... Can't have what? Eli's voice was dangerously quiet. A man choosing his own wife, a woman seeking redemption through marriage. You know what she is. This from Councilman Porter. What she's done. I know she's shown me more kindness and courage than most so-called respectable folk. Eli said, I know she's worked herself raw caring for my home and land. I know she stood beside me against armed men when she could have run. Clara stepped out from behind him. You want to know what I am? She addressed the crowd, voice clear and strong. I'm an orphan who survived, a woman who ran from evil men, a person who made choices to stay alive when the world offered only bad options. Yes, I worked in a saloon for 3 weeks, serving drinks and fighting off hands that tried to take more. Is that what makes me unworthy of love, of marriage, of a second chance? The crowd shifted uneasily. Some faces softened, but others hardened further. Pretty words, sneered Councilman Hobbs. But we all know what serving drinks means. It means serving drinks. Clara said flatly, nothing more, though I wonder why it would matter if it meant otherwise. Don't you good Christian folk believe in forgiveness? Or is that only for men who come home from wars? Or those who can hide their sins better? How dare you? She dares because she's my wife, Eli interrupted. And anyone who insults her insults me. I've lived peaceful these 6 years, but I wasn't always a peaceful man. Push me, and you'll remember why. The threat hung in the air. Everyone knew Eli Monroe's reputation. Even if most had been content to forget it while he lived quietly in the hills, Mrs. Patterson stepped forward. For shame, all of you. This young woman has done nothing but try to build a decent life. And this is how you welcome her. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Ellen's right. Tom Martinez added, we all got pasts. Difference is, some of us are honest about ours. Mayor Douglas sputtered, but Clara saw uncertainty in his eyes. The crowd was dividing, some nodding agreement with Mrs. Patterson, others clustering around the councilman. We'll be going now, Eli announced. My wife and I have a home to tend. He helped Clara onto the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her. But know this, Clara is under my protection. Any slight against her, any whispered word that reaches her ears, I'll take as personal offense, and I've got a long memory. He clicked to the horses, and they rolled out of town. Clara kept her spine straight until they were out of sight, then sagged against Eli's shoulder. I'm sorry, she whispered. I've brought you trouble. You've brought me life, he corrected. Let them talk. Words can't hurt us. But Clara knew better. Words could hurt, could isolate, could make their trips to town a misery. She'd condemned him to share her status as outsider. They were a mile from home when they heard horses approaching fast. Eli reached for his rifle, but relaxed when Mrs. Patterson's buggy came into view. Tom Martinez riding alongside. Don't stop. Mrs. Patterson called. Just wanted to say, you've got friends in town. Not many, maybe, but some. My door's always open to you, Mrs. Monroe. Mine too, Tom added. My Maria wants to meet the woman who tamed Eli Monroe. Clara's eyes filled. Thank you, both of you. Mrs. Patterson smiled. Us outsiders need to stick together. I wasn't born here either. Came as a young bride 40 years ago. They whispered about me too, said I had airs, read too many books, spoke my mind too freely. Still do, on that last count. They talked a few minutes more, then parted ways. Clara watched them go, something loosening in her chest. Not everyone would accept her, but some would. It was more than she dared hope. Back home, Eli carried her over the threshold, bad leg and all. They stood in their kitchen, their home, their life together, and held each other. No regrets? Clara asked. Only that I didn't marry you sooner. He kissed her temple. What about you? You could have had a quiet life if you'd married someone without my reputation. I don't want quiet. I want real. I want you. That night, as they lay entwined in their marriage bed, Clara thought about the faces in town, the hostile ones, the curious ones, the few kind ones. Tomorrow would bring challenges. There would be whispers to endure, cold shoulders to face, respectability to earn through patient work and time. But tonight, she was Clara May Monroe, legal wife of Elijah Monroe. No one could take that from her. She'd stood in the center of town and spoken her truth without flinching. She'd claimed her right to love and be loved. Past be damned. What are you thinking? Eli murmured against her hair. That I'm proud of us, of what we did today. Standing up to the whole town? Standing up for each other, for our right to choose. She turned in his arms to face him. I meant what I said about second chances. We both deserve ours. Then we'll take it, he said simply. Day by day, together. Outside, coyotes howled in the darkness. But inside their cabin, Clara and Eli Monroe began their married life, building something new from the ashes of their pasts. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But it was theirs. And that was enough. Spring arrived with a profusion of wildflowers and morning sickness that sent Clara racing for the wash basin. She knelt on the floor, Eli holding her hair back, his hand gentle on her spine. Maybe something you ate, he suggested when the spell passed. Clara sat back on her heels, doing quick calculations in her head. Her monthly courses, usually reliable as clockwork, were 6 weeks late. The fatigue she'd attributed to hard work, the tenderness in her breasts she'd ignored. Eli, she said slowly, I think I'm carrying, his hand stilled on her back, carrying a baby, our baby. The silence stretched so long Clara feared she'd misread everything. Then Eli was pulling her into his arms, his face buried in her hair, his shoulders shaking. Eli, I never thought... His voice was rough with emotion. Never imagined I'd have this, a wife, a child, a real family. Clara pulled back to see his face, finding tears on his cheeks. You're happy? Happy? He laughed, the sound half sob. Clara May, you've given me everything I never dared dream of. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. They sat on the floor, holding each other while morning light filled the kitchen. Finally, Eli helped her to her feet, his hands impossibly gentle. You need to see Doc Morrison in town. Make sure everything's well. Clara tensed. They'd been to town only twice since their wedding 3 months ago, and both visits had been exercises in endurance. The whispers, the turned backs, the women who crossed the street rather than share the boardwalk with her. We could wait, she suggested. I feel fine. No. Eli's voice was firm. I won't risk you or the baby for the sake of avoiding gossip. So they went. Clara wearing her good dress and Eli in his church clothes, both armored in respectability. Doc Morrison, at least, was professional, examining Clara with clinical detachment before pronouncing her healthy and approximately 3 months along. October, baby, he said, washing his hands. You'll want to lay in supplies before the snow comes. First babies are unpredictable. Outside the doctor's office, Clara took Eli's arm, dizzy with the reality of it. A baby, their child, growing inside her. "Mrs. Monroe!" They turned to find Mrs. Patterson hurrying toward them, face bright with pleasure. "How lovely to see you in town. I was just—" She stopped, studying Clara's face with a woman's intuition. "My dear, you're glowing. Am I to understand congratulations are in order?" Clara glanced at Eli, who nodded slightly. "Yes, October." Mrs. Patterson clapped her hands. "How wonderful. Your first?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then you'll need things. Baby clothes, blankets, advice. Come to the parsonage next week. My sewing circle meets Wednesdays." Clara blinked. Your sewing circle?" "Of course. You'll need help preparing, and we've all been through it." "Mrs. Patterson's voice dropped. "Not everyone will welcome you. I won't lie, but some will, and that's a start." After she left, Clara stood frozen on the boardwalk. An invitation to a respectable ladies' sewing circle. It seemed impossible. "You'll go," Eli said quietly. "What if they—" "Then you'll hold your head high and come home to me." He touched her cheek. "But I think you might surprise them. And yourself." The following Wednesday, Clara approached the parsonage with the same nervousness she'd felt facing Jake Whelan's men. The sound of women's voices drifted through the open windows. Laughter, chatter, the normal sounds of friendship she'd never been part of. She knocked, and Mrs. Patterson answered immediately. "Clara, come in, come in. Ladies, Mrs. Monroe is here." The parlor held 6 women, their needlework in their laps. Clara recognized most: the baker's wife, the school teacher, Tom Martinez's wife, Maria. Some faces showed welcome, others careful neutrality. One, Mrs. Hobbs, looked like she'd bitten into something sour. "Clara's expecting her first in October." "Mrs. Patterson announced. "I thought we could help her prepare." "How? Nice." "Mrs. Hobbs managed. Maria Martinez patted the seat beside her. "Sit with me, Clara. Your first—" "Yes? So exciting." The next hour passed in a blur of advice, patterns, and gradually warming conversation. Clara's neat stitches earned approval, and her questions about pregnancy brought a flood of stories, some hilarious, some terrifying, all honest. I was sick every morning for 5 months," the baker's wife confided. "Thought I'd die. Then one day it stopped, and I ate everything in sight." "Mine came 2 weeks early," the school teacher added. "During a blizzard. My husband had to deliver him himself." Even Mrs. Hobbs eventually thawed enough to offer advice about swollen feet and backaches. By the time Clara left, her arms full of fabric scraps and borrowed patterns, she felt something she'd never experienced: the warmth of female fellowship. "How was it?" Eli asked when she returned home. "Strange. Good. I think I made friends." He pulled her close, hands spreading over her still flat stomach. "Our child will have a place here, a real home, a real life." "Yes," Clara agreed, covering his hands with hers. "They will." The months that followed were the happiest of Clara's life. Her belly grew round and firm, the baby quick and active. Eli talked to the child every night, telling stories of horses and mountains, his voice soft with wonder. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving tiny horses into the headboard. Clara returned to the sewing circle each week, slowly earning her place. Some women remained cool, but others embraced her. She learned their stories, the affairs forgiven, the children lost, the dreams deferred. Everyone had secrets. She realized hers were just more visible. The summer heat grew oppressive as Clara entered her 8th month. Her ankles swelled, her back ached constantly, and the baby seemed determined to kick her ribs to pieces. But she kept working, preserving vegetables, sewing baby clothes, preparing for winter and motherhood both. One August afternoon, Eli came in from the barn to find her struggling with the wash, tears of frustration on her cheeks. "Here now," he said, taking the wet sheet from her hands. "What's this?" "I can't even do simple things anymore." She sobbed. I'm huge and useless and beautiful, he interrupted. Strong, carrying our child. He led her to the rocking chair, kneeling awkwardly beside it. Rest, let me finish. She watched him hang laundry with his careful, limping gait, love overwhelming her. You shouldn't have to care for my pregnant wife, shouldn't share the work of making our home. He looked back at her. Clara, you've given me everything. Let me give something back. That night, as they lay in bed, the baby particularly active. Eli spread his hand over her belly. The baby kicked against his palm, and his face lit with joy. Strong little thing, like his father. Clara said, her mother. Eli countered, I hope it's a girl, with your hair and your courage. And your eyes, Clara added. That gray that sees straight through to the truth. They'd had this conversation a dozen times, imagining their child. Boy or girl didn't matter. Healthy was all they prayed for. But Clara secretly hoped for a boy. Someone to carry on Eli's name, to redeem it from its violent past. September arrived with relief from the heat. Clara could barely walk now, the baby so low she felt it might fall out any moment. Doc Morrison checked her weekly, pronouncing everything progressing normally. Won't be long now, he said after one visit. Baby's dropped, getting ready. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She paced the cabin, pausing when practice contractions tightened her belly. Eli watched from the bed, worry clear on his face. Should I fetch the doctor? Not yet. He said this could go on for days. But her body had other plans. Near dawn, her water broke in a warm gush, and the practice pains became something altogether different. Eli, she gasped. Now, get the doctor now. He dressed in record time, but she caught his arm as he headed for the door. Wait, in case you don't make it back in time. Don't say that. Listen to me. She gripped his hand through another contraction. If something happens, if you have to choose, nothing will happen. His voice was fierce. You'll be fine, both of you. Promise me. Choose the baby. Clara, promise. He kissed her hard. I promise nothing except to bring the doctor. You hold on, you hear me? You fight. Then he was gone, and Clara was alone with her laboring body. She walked, she rocked. She gripped the furniture through each wave of pain. The sun rose higher, and still no Eli. When he finally burst through the door, Doc Morrison and Mrs. Patterson behind him. Clara was on her knees beside the bed, certain she was dying. Good position. The doctor said calmly, let's see how far along you are. What followed was hours of pain unlike anything Clara had imagined. Mrs. Patterson mopped her face and whispered encouragement while Eli held her hands, letting her squeeze until his fingers went white. Doc Morrison remained unflappable, checking progress and offering reassurance. Almost there, he said as afternoon shadows lengthened. Next contraction, you push. Clara bore down with everything she had. A scream tearing from her throat. Again, and then a baby's cry. Sharp and strong. It's a girl, Doc Morrison announced. A perfect little girl. Clara sobbed as they placed the baby on her chest. Tiny fists waved in the air, the small face scrunched in displeasure at this bright, cold world. Dark hair. So much dark hair. And when the baby opened her eyes, gray, Eli whispered. She has gray eyes. Most babies do at first, Doc Morrison said. Might change. But Clara knew they wouldn't. This was Eli's daughter through and through, from her stubborn chin to those storm-colored eyes. What will you call her? Mrs. Patterson asked. Clara looked at Eli. They'd discussed names for months but never decided. Sarah, Eli said softly. For my mother. Sarah Clara Monroe. Sarah Clara, Clara repeated, testing the weight of it. Yes, as Doc Morrison finished tending to Clara and Mrs. Patterson bustled about with efficiency. Eli sat on the bed's edge, one arm around Clara, the other cradling their daughter. She's perfect, he said, wonder in every word. Look what we made. Look what we survived to make. Clara corrected. He kissed her temple. Thank you, for her, for this life, for not giving up when things got hard. Thank you for giving me something to fight for. They sat in the gathering dusk, their daughter between them, and Clara felt the last walls around her heart crumble. This was her family, her home, her future. Sarah Clara Monroe would never wonder if she was wanted, would never sleep hungry or cold or alone, would grow up knowing she was loved beyond measure by parents who'd fought through hell to give her this life. It was more than Clara had ever dared dream. It was everything. The acrid smell of smoke pulled Clara from sleep. For a moment, she thought it was the stove, but the quality was wrong. Thicker, carrying the scent of hay and old wood. She shook Eli awake. Fire! She gasped. He was up instantly, grabbing his trousers. Through the window, orange light danced across the yard. The barn was ablaze. Stay here, Eli commanded, reaching for his boots. But Clara was already wrapping Sarah in blankets. At 6 months old, their daughter slept through most disturbances, but the shouting outside woke her with a start. Clara! Eli's voice carried from the yard. They're here. She knew who they were without asking. Jake Whelan had finally come to collect his due. She grabbed the rifle Eli kept by the door and crept to the window. 5 men on horseback ringed the yard, faces hidden by bandanas. Jake sat bold as brass, no mask hiding his satisfied smirk. The barn burned behind them, their horses already moved to safety, small mercies in the midst of nightmare. Monroe, Jake called. Send her out and we ride away. Keep playing hero, and we'll burn you out complete. Eli stood on the porch, rifle steady despite his bad leg. You burned my barn, Whelan. That's going to cost you. Big talk, but there's 5 of us and 1 of you. 2. Clara called from the window. Her rifle barrel caught the firelight, and I'm a better shot than last time. Jake's face darkened. Should have known you'd be fool enough to stand by him. No matter, we'll take you both. Over my dead body, Eli said quietly. That's the idea. The first shot came from one of Jake's men, splintering wood near Eli's head. Clara fired back, her bullet catching the shooter's shoulder, spinning him from his horse. Then everything erupted. Eli dropped to one knee, using the porch rail for cover as he fired with deadly precision. Another rider fell. Clara shot out the window, driving the others to cover. Baby Sarah wailed from her cradle, adding to the chaos. The cabin, someone shouted. Burn them out! A rider broke from cover, torch in hand. Clara's shot took his horse's legs, sending both tumbling. The torch flew wild, igniting the vegetable garden she'd tended all summer. You always were a poor leader, Whelan. Eli called, reloading with practiced ease, bringing boys to do a man's work. Shut up and die, cripple! But Jake's remaining men were losing heart. One clutched a bleeding arm. Another's horse danced nervously as flames spread through the yard. Only Jake seemed determined to see it through. Then Clara heard it, horses approaching fast, many horses. Riders coming, one of Jake's men yelled. Through the smoke, Clara saw them. Tom Martinez leading a group of men from town, all armed, misses. Patterson's buggy followed, the minister himself handling the reins. That's enough, Whelan, Tom shouted. You're done here. Jake looked at the reinforcements, at his wounded men, at the burning barn. His face twisted with rage. This isn't over, he snarled. Yes, said a new voice. It is. Sheriff Washington rode through the smoke like judgment itself. Clara had never seen him this far from town, but here he was, badge glinting in the firelight. Jake Whelan, you're under arrest for arson, attempted murder, and disturbing the peace. You can't. I can, and I will. The sheriff's gun was already drawn. You've terrorized these people enough. Drop your weapons. For a moment, Clara thought Jake would fight. His hand twitched toward his gun, but faced with the sheriff and half the town, even his rage couldn't overcome sense. He threw down his pistol. Take him, Sheriff Washington ordered. His deputies moved in, binding Jake and his remaining men. Doc Morrison, see to the wounded. Rest of you, let's get this fire contained. What followed was controlled chaos. Men formed bucket brigades, saving the cabin and chicken coop though the barn was lost. Women appeared with blankets and coffee. Doc Morrison tended wounds with professional detachment. Clara found herself on the porch. Sarah clutched to her chest, watching their neighbors save their home. Eli sat beside her, arm around them both, his rifle still close at hand. "Why?" Clara asked Mrs. Patterson. "Why did you all come?" The minister's wife smiled sadly. "Tom Martinez saw riders heading this way, recognized Whelan. He raised the alarm." She paused. "Clara, these past months, we've watched you, seen how hard you work, how you care for your family. You're one of us now, whether everyone admits it or not. We protect our own," Tom added, soot streaking his face. "That's what neighbors do." By dawn, the fire was out. Jake Whelan and his men were headed for the county jail. The barn was gone, but the house stood strong. Neighbors who'd barely acknowledged Clara for months now drank coffee in her kitchen. "We'll help rebuild," the baker promised. "Barn raising next week, if that suits." "I've got spare lumber," another added. "No charge." Clara's eyes burned with smoke and tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes, Mrs. Patterson advised. "Let people help. It's how we build community." After everyone left, Clara and Eli surveyed the damage. The barn skeleton stood black against the rising sun. Her garden was ash, but they were alive, whole, together. "I'm sorry," Clara said. "This is my fault. My past." "Our past," Eli corrected. "And it's done now. Whelan will get hard labor or a rope, depending on the judge. Either way, he won't threaten us again." Sarah fussed in Clara's arms, ready for her breakfast. Such a normal need after such an extraordinary night. "The town came," Clara said wonderingly. "They defended us." "They defended you," Eli said. "You've won them over, Clara May. With your courage and your kind heart and your stubborn refusal to be anything less than yourself." The barn raising happened as promised. Men Clara had never spoken to showed up with tools and muscle. Women brought food enough for an army. Children played in the yard while their parents rebuilt what violence had destroyed. Clara worked alongside them, Sarah sleeping in a sling across her chest. When the baby woke hungry, no one batted an eye as Clara nursed her in the shade. She was a mother now, respectable by virtue of motherhood if nothing else. "Fine-looking barn," Sheriff Washington commented as the frame took shape. He'd stopped by to update them. Jake Whelan bound over for trial. "Likely to serve 10 years hard labor. Finer neighbors," Eli replied. The sheriff nodded. "You've both come a long way. Town's better for having you." As the sun set on the new barn, Clara stood with Eli watching neighbors become friends. Mrs. Hobbs, who'd snubbed her for months, now cooed over Sarah. The mayor himself had hammered boards alongside former gunfighters and Mexican blacksmiths. "Look at that," Eli murmured. "All it took was nearly dying to make us respectable." Clara laughed, leaning into his solid warmth. "I'll take it however it comes." The gathering turned into an impromptu celebration. Someone produced a fiddle, and dancing broke out in the yard. Clara watched from the porch, Sarah wide-eyed at all the activity. "Dance with me," Eli said suddenly. "Your leg. We'll manage one dance with my wife." He drew her up, careful of the baby. "Let them all see, the broken gunfighter and the fallen woman, standing strong." They swayed together in the lamplight. Sarah between them, around them. Their community celebrated not just a barn raised, but walls torn down, prejudices overcome, humanity recognized. "I love you," Clara whispered. "Thank you for fighting for us." "Thank you for being worth fighting for," Eli replied. As the evening wound down and neighbors headed home, Clara realized her past no longer defined her. She was Clara Monroe, wife, mother, neighbor, friend. The road had been hard. The scars were real. But she'd found her place at last, that night, in their bed with Sarah safe in her cradle. Clara traced the new lines on Eli's face. Laugh lines, earned through joy rather than pain. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That we did it. Built a life from ashes, made beauty from broken things." "We're not done yet," Eli said. "This is just the beginning." Outside, wind rustled through the hay already stacked in the new barn. The horses whickered softly in their stalls. All was peaceful. All was well. Clara Monroe closed her eyes and dreamed of the future. More children, more harvests, more chances to prove that love could conquer fear. The girl who'd been sold like cattle had become a woman who stood tall. The gunfighter who'd courted death had found reasons to live. Together, they'd written a different ending to their stories. And in the golden light of dawn breaking over the mountains, with their daughter's sweet breath filling the silence, Clara knew the best chapters were yet to come. In this wild, unforgiving land, they'd carved out something precious, a home built on choice rather than chance, on love rather than law. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And that, Clara thought as sleep finally claimed her, was everything. Thank you for joining us on Clara and Eli's journey through the untamed frontier. If you're listening to this story, we'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Leave a comment below and let's connect across the miles, just as our characters connected across their differences. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more tales of courage, redemption, and love against all odds. What did you think of Clara and Eli's story? Share your thoughts below. We read every comment and your feedback shapes the stories we tell.